All right, so supposedly I am live. I never recorded from my cell phone before, but we'll see how this turns out. What do I want to talk about? Well, I'm I continue to sneak in functional programming techniques, or I'll just say functional programming, into the work that I'm doing. And outside of it being cool, to practice advanced techniques, at least relative to my experience of building systems, primarily in object oriented programming, I, I really do believe that there's more than a coolness factor. I think that if the true intent of building software is to solve people's problems, and if people's problems primarily consist of not making enough money or not reducing enough expenses throughout the software development lifecycle of software itself, then why not seek the most effective techniques, methodologies, tools overall to solve problems and to help people, whether these are corporations, mom and pops, or students that want to learn how to be better at solving problems, want to be better at troubleshooting. So a functional core and imperative shell. I heard that phrase in a podcast that I was listening to that had the guest Stephen Proctor on it. I don't know the name of the that particular podcast, but it was Scala centric. But overall, most of it focused on just functional programming in general. But the podcast host, he was focused on Scala. But I heard that phrase that today's systems should should primarily focus on having a functional core with an imperative shell. And I think that makes sense to me. So, what does that mean, a functional core? Well, I've been practicing for over a year, or close to a year, Scott Blashen's book, Domain Modeling Made Functional. That book is probably in my top 5 books that have revolutionized the way that I build software. Some other books are Head First Design Patterns, um, the book on Prism, which is a framework, but it taught me about engineering user experiences in regards to WPF development. Pragmatic Programmer, uh, the I forgot the other one, the Passionate Developer or Passionate Programmer. Those are a few books, but anyways, in regards to a functional core, when you you build software with the intent, with emphasis on intent, on making illegal states unrepresentable, a functional core. When you identify the main operations that are to support the domain, with emphasis on the main operations. When you reach agreement that domain driven design is interesting and it probably is the best tool or methodology for building complex features, let alone a complex system. DDD rolls into a functional core. Illegal states made unrepresentable rolls into a functional core. property-based testing, example-based testing, aka unit tests. Like all this stuff is starting to make sense. Now, I'm sure I'm going to catch resistance when other people that are maintaining legacy code are tasked with reviewing uh, the system that I'm building that's pretty close to being complete now, let alone other systems that I've built. But how should that really play out? Should it be, oh, Scott, why did you write this in this weird language? Right? Hence, coming from management or coming from peer developers. Or will the question be, well, Scott, this is different compared to what we've been looking at, yet this tends to work very well, and there doesn't appear to be many bugs, or the bugs that we have discovered seem to be patched relatively quickly based on the requirements doc. And these aren't new bugs that are really just new features that weren't in the original spec. So the question is, will I be criticized for using a tool that is best for the job, but not best for mainstream developers, aka mediocre developers? Or will the question go as to, wow, we delivered, or you delivered this feature on time within budget, and it's pretty solid, and the automated tests that have been written are essentially documentation that's compilable in a set of instructions on all these different scenarios that this feature supports. And this is essentially the point of reference for how to leverage the API that the functional core exposes. How do we get up to date with this technology? How do we get up to date with this programming language that supports tests or code being inherently testable, code being thread safe by default, code being generic by default? What else? Code being immutable by default. Code that provides support to auto-generate thousands, if not millions, of tests via property-based testing. Code that is rigor strict and constrains users of the API that this functional core exposes to only be allowed to pass in data and get results that are guaranteed with a high probability to not break, and that you can't misuse the API because the API is very strict on the parameters that you need to pass into it to get anything out, or else it just won't compile, right? This illegal state's unrepresentable. There's certain channels that you have to go through in order to even satisfy an API if you want to leverage it. All right? Functional core, imperative domain. Now, within the imperative domain, then I have my view models that rely on this API that was fleshed out using domain-driven design. The view models were generated using test-driven development. Meaning, again, if you really have questions about how to use this code base, then I strongly encourage you to look at the tests. They're compilable documentation, right? And, well, again, Scott, why did you do this? Scott, we don't know how to maintain this. The question is, Scott, can you help us identify the thought process in the way that you did this? Why did you create a type for first name, a type for last name, a type for full name? Why did you constrain that in order for this operation, in order to leverage this operation, you can't pass in a string. You have to pass in a qualified value that can only be generated from a smart constructor that will take an attempt of creating that value and through validation either return some value that has been validated or nothing at all. All right, these are just several techniques that I've learned. A big shout out to Scott Bloshin. But I really believe that it's time that the industry steps it up, man. In any other business, if you don't keep up, if you don't exploit technology that reduces the effort, if you don't take advantage of this, you get left behind. You become deprecated, obsolete, right? We're in an era where businesses have to compete because their competitors are now getting into continuous integration, continuous delivery, and they are spitting out features every day, every week, every couple weeks, right? And none of this would be possible without leveraging the digital machinery that we have for software today. Hence, continuous integration pipelines, continuous delivery pipelines, all these automated tools. There's no reason why you should have issues with me building systems that adhere or comply to modern recommended practices that encourage compliance for maintainable systems. I'll repeat that one more time. There's no reason why I should be criticized or critiqued for working within the field of technology, consciously making a decision to select a language along with an ecosystem that hosts it to basically enable a business to be competitive in a competitive marketplace. Okay? So the question is, why did you do this? This is unfamiliar. We don't understand it. That's not the question. The question is, based on the value that this implementation provides that complies with maintenance-friendly systems, how can we get up to date on using technologies that enable our business to be more competitive? That's the question. I'm Scott Nimrod, aka Bizmonger, going live from South Beach, and I'm out. I don't know how to kill this now. Do I just hit this X on the top right hand corner?